Hello and welcome to pmclounge.com. In this video, let's talk about extreme programming. And the first question you should be asking here is extreme programming in any way related to project management? Because it has that programming word in the end. So isn't this something which is specifically for software engineers, developers, coders, and not a concept that project managers should be aware of? Well, you would be wrong because extreme programming is actually a part of the Agile umbrella, and you and I, as project managers, need to be aware of extreme programming. So, let's take an example here. Let's look at this scenario. Your team has developed a beautiful e commerce website for your customer. All right, everything sounds good. So, sometime down the line, there is a change in the way data is stored, and this required making changes to the code as well. So, there's some change in the backend. Maybe the customer wants to use a new database. So, this also requires changes in the code. So, that is also something that your team was able to do. Now, what happens after that is your team made the changes, but there are instances in the code where the previous code modules are also being fetched. So it was impossible for the team to essentially make changes everywhere because there wasn't sufficient downtime that was allowed by the customer, right? So the team went ahead with a hack by adding comments to wherever this was happening so that it could be fixed in the future. So wherever in the code the previous code module was being fetched, the engineers added a comment there that make sure this is changed in the future. So that's the hack that the software engineers made use of. Now, we are now at a point where the team is worried about making code changes that could create more frustrating work due to the hacky code. End of the day, the code is not clean. If there are further changes required to the code modules, to the code module that is being fetched, right, it could lead to more unnecessary work. And this is actually a byproduct of hacky code. This is a byproduct of not having sufficient downtime by the customer. This is definitely a planning gap. And this is where extreme programming comes into the picture. Extreme programming is essentially focused not just on project management like Scrum, but also on how teams actually build the code. So this is essentially best of both worlds. This is the reason why you and I, as project managers, need to know about extreme programming as well. Because while Scrum is going to talk about project management, extreme programming is going to teach you not just about project management, but also about how to build code, how you should build code to avoid problems. One of the problems that we talked about in the previous slides, right? So it falls under the Agile umbrella and is actually an Agile methodology that has been popular among software teams since as early as 1990s. That's great. Just like Scrum, there are practices and values of extreme programming that help the teams get into an effective mindset. So we all remember the principles of Agile. We all remember the Agile manifesto. We've talked about Scrum values, right? Similarly, there are certain practices and values of extreme programming as well that we are going to look into. Now, extreme programming mindset helps the team with three things. Number one is increased cohesion. Number two is better communication. And number three is better job planning, or you might say better planning of scope of work, right? So these three are the promised outputs of using extreme programming: increased cohesion amongst the team members, better communication amongst the team members, and better scope planning, better job planning, better planning of the work at hand. I also wanted to touch upon these two gentlemen named Kent Beck and Ron Jeffries because they are regarded as the creators of extreme programming. Both are pioneers of lightweight software engineering. So this is Ken Beck and this is Ron Jeffries. If you know a little bit about programming, if you have spoken to enough software developers, you might have heard about one or two quotes of Ron Jeffries as well, because they are very, very famous. One of them being "Code never lies, comments sometimes do. So you essentially need a bit of coding knowledge to get the context of what Ron is talking about here. But anyways, how does extreme programming help? We talked about a scenario when we started off this video, right? So how does extreme programming help solve that kind of problem? Number one is extreme programming, just like Scrum, relies on quick sprints, frequent releases, and constant stakeholder collaboration that can improve productivity. That's the first takeaway. Secondly, frequent releases basically introduce checkpoints at which new customer requirements can be adopted. And these frequent releases is where you can introduce making code changes where you had added comment, right? And where you were fetching the previous code modules. I'm talking about the example that I took in the initial slides. So when you have these frequent releases, when you have these release windows, you get the time, the checkpoints to be able to accommodate that kind of requirements as well. Remove or replace your comments with the actual code change. The idea is that this will help in avoiding employee burnout as well as increase the quality of deliverables, which is both true in the case in the example that I spoke of, right? When you are able to remove the comments and make the actual code changes because you have so many release windows, you are able to ensure that the code quality is really good, and you are also avoiding burnout because you now don't have to deal with hacky code, and you will not be scared of making changes to the code just because it may lead to breakage somewhere else. So this was the initial discussion on extreme programming. We've done a video in the past where I talked about extreme programming in a nutshell. So that was essentially an overview of extreme programming. If you want to check that video out, feel free to do so. The link will be in the description. A quick word about the important links that you're going to find in the description. The first one will always be a relevant article on this topic over at our official website pmclounge.com, and this video is going to help you prepare for your PMI ACP certification as well as cover the agile part of your PMP certification. So if you want to check out more videos from these playlists, right? If you're preparing for PMI ACP, you will find the playlist in the description. If you are preparing for your PMP exam and you are studying Agile, then you will find that playlist in the description as well. This video is going to fit in both of these playlists. So that's all in this one. I'll catch you guys in the next video. Bye-bye.